Hello, this is Kim Turner, and in this video I'm going to show you how to create an if function. An if function is called a logical function, and it shows a value in a cell based on a condition within the formula. We're going to begin with a very simple if function by showing either a 1 or a 0 in the cell based on the condition. So a basic if function can show two different values in a cell. For this if function, I'm going to be populating column M, which is labeled KPI. Now KPI stands for Key Performance Indicator, and it's going to be used for this customer service call center log in determining how many calls were put on hold over 15 seconds. If a call was put on hold for more than 15 seconds, then it did not meet the KPI. So this column is going to calculate how many calls were over the hold time goal. That calculation is in column L. Any values in column L that are positive, it means that the customer was kept on hold for over 15 seconds. And in our spreadsheet here, we have key performance indicator table that has the goal of 15 seconds, and then it has how many calls are above the goal and the hold time failure rate. So the rate would indicate of all the calls that were received, how many were over the goal of 15 seconds. So let's go ahead and get started. And of course, you always put an equal sign in the cell when we're creating a formula. We need to go find the if function. We can find it in two places. We can find it in this insert function icon. I call it the f of x. And you can click on that, and it brings up common functions that you've recently used. And you can search for it in the search bar by typing if and then go. So you can find the if function by clicking on f of x, but you can also go to the formulas tab and go to the logical icon and scroll down until you see if there. And that also brings up the dialog box. So the first thing we want to look at is the logical test. What is the condition that we're looking at? And in this case, the condition we're looking at is if the value in column L is positive or greater than 0. If it's greater than 0, that means the customer was kept on hold for greater than 15 seconds. So I'm going to click on the cell L5, and it'll automatically go into the dialog box. And I'm going to say if L5 is greater than 0 or positive, that means I want to count it when I sum up this column. So if it's true, I want a 1 to go into the cell. But if the condition is false, then I want a 0 to go into the cell, which means it's a negative number. And I'll go ahead and click OK. So you'll notice that a 0 appears in the cell, and when I test it I can say, oh, okay, negative 10 is not greater than 0, it's less than 0, so that means it's false and a 0 should appear in the cell. The next thing I'll need to do is autofill down the column. And when I release, I always look for the icon that's called autofill options. Then I can click on the arrow to the right of it and go to fill without formatting. That will allow my banded rows to appear. And now we want to do kind of a random check to make sure that the if function is working. So I see that this cell here has a 1, and when I check the formula, if L13 is greater than 0, which it is, then a 1 should appear, and a 1 does appear. So this column M then shows all of the times where the customer was kept on hold for greater than 15 seconds, and the KPI table will sum up those calls in column M and say that out of all of the calls for the day, 441 calls were kept on hold for more than 15 seconds, which means there's a failure rate of 86%. So it's something that the company can focus on in order to reduce the time that customers are kept on hold. So that's the example of how an if function can be used to show two different values in the cell. Now, if you wanted a word to appear in the cell instead of a value, you would put that word in quotations. So, for example, instead of 1 appearing in the cell, I want the word bad to appear. So in my formula bar, I'll go ahead and delete the 1, and then in quotations, I'll write bad. That's what I want to appear if L5 is greater than 0 or positive. But if it's less than 0, I think I'd like a blank to appear. So I'll simply delete the 0 and then put 2 quotations there. That means that I want nothing to appear in the cell. So since L5 is less than 0, then nothing appears in the cell. And when I go ahead and autofill down that column, you can see that bad appears in the cell when the number is positive. So that's another way to use the if function to show words in the cell instead of number values. So go ahead and try creating your own if function and then spot check a few cells in the column to make sure that it's working correctly.